start our meeting. For those who are attending who want to share this with people later, this meeting will be put on Spectra Diversity's YouTube channel. So welcome everyone. I am Chris Jones. I'm the co-founder of Spectra Diversity. And we created Spectra Diversity originally because there wasn't another DEI assessment that measured both the individual and the organization in a single survey. And that's why we created it. And we still are the only assessment that does that. I'm currently the CEO, but this will not be a Spectra Diversity advertising session. But we will be showing Spectra Diversity data because that's what I have access to. There's a book, Powering Inclusive Cultures, which you can use that as a guideline for this webinar series, or so you can use it or not use it. It's totally up to you. And as my guest today, I have Amanuel Medhanie. And Amanuel, you want to say just oh, he's waving. Amanuel and I have worked together for several years. His company is Parsimony. I hope I said that right. And he does data analysis for small consulting firms. And he will be tackling things that are beyond my knowledge scope. Thank you, Amanuel. So today what we're going to do is learn the difference between what is good data and what is bad data. And as we're getting started, if you want to connect with each other, feel free to put your LinkedIn profile information in the chat. So we're going to learn the difference between good and bad data. We're going to be able to, after this session, put into action a few of the best practices for DEI surveys. We'll be able to spot measurement myths when you're looking at different assessments and their results. And at the end, we will have a giveaway, must be present to win. So I'd like to know a little bit about each of you and what your role is so that I can sort of tailor comments a little bit as we go through. Tammy, can you, yep, there is the poll. And if you will just click what your role is. Okay. We have some others. I'm always curious about what others are. If you could put, for others, if you want to put down what the other is in the chat box, that would be very lovely. So I'm going to end this. Can you see the results there? I hope. Okay. Stop sharing of the poll. Thank you. So we have mostly DEI consultants, facilitators, and coaches. Here are the results, which you should be able to see. And thank you very much. No C-suite executives. And this is that's who the book is designed for, is C-suite executives. People that know nothing about DEI, but want to do a better job of working in that space. Okay. So, data-driven DEI. Here's a quote from Ben Bernanke. In many spheres of human endeavor, from science to business to education to economic policy, good decisions depend on good measurement. And I'm a firm believer in this. Without measurement, you don't know what you don't know. An example of this is a colleague of mine. She was called in to do race training. And she said, sure, I can do race training, but let's measure first. And they did measure, and it turned out that they actually didn't have a racial issue in their organization. What they had was a difference between the generations. So, oh, okay, Amazon to you. Thank you, Lori. So let's dive in. So a lot of you probably noticed the increase in DEI after the murder of George Floyd and some other similar incidents, Philando Castillo, Sandra Bland, there were a number of them. And in 2021, the year after the Black Lives Matter protest, there were 300,000 new jobs that were added to the S&P 100, 95% to people of color. In 2021, upper level jobs increased by 2%. And we all know that since we're working in this field, that inclusive organizations have better innovation. They are able to capture new markets better business decisions, and they're more likely to have an above average profitability. So that is what is the reality of this situation. But many of you may have been feeling some DEI pushback, and we're going to cover that actually in our February webinar, where we're going to talk about DEI in the world today and how it matters to CEOs. Today, we're going to focus on the positive. Click. So this is a little quiz. You can put your answers in the chat box. And this actually was part of the invitation that you may have gotten. Organizations that have documented HR analytics are how much more, what percentage more likely are they to score in their ability to enable innovation? And just put your best guess in the chat box. %75, 25. I think you're going to be surprised at this. 86% more likely to score highly in innovation. So innovation, big boost there. Leadership, organizations that are data-driven. And we're assuming that this is data-driven in terms of their people analytics as opposed to, manufacturing and whatnot. How many times more likely to be effective? Let's give me your best guess. How many times more? Bigly. Thank you, Daryl. And Suya, 7. I'm just going to show you this one. 10 times more effective at providing insights to top leaders. And then, which is 10 times more. If that was any other kind of a scale, that would be huge. Organizations that have documented HR analytics are blank % more likely to score highly in their ability to produce the desired outcomes or results. Give me your best guess. This 70, 90, big numbers. And it is a big number, but it's not that big. It is 45% more. So all of these organizations that are data-driven reap the rewards. That's the good news. So let's take a look. This is, and you've probably seen this definition before from Arthur Chan. Diversity is a fact, and we measure that with 6 standard demographics of people. Equity is a choice. We measure that with 5 statements which are aligned with equity. Inclusion is an action. And we have 8 statements in our survey that align with inclusion. And belonging is an outcome. We have 13 statements with align with outcomes. So what have you been doing in terms of DEI? And can you launch this poll, Tammy? So here's the options. I do nothing. I do a survey that I created. I add 3 questions to an engagement survey. I use a free DEI survey, or I use a statistically validated survey. Okay. Couple more people to answer. If you see the survey, please click a link. We're going to close it in just a second here. Okay, and can you share the results, Tammy, or am I sharing the results? Okay, a survey I created. Well, good. Nobody's doing nothing, and that's good news. A survey I created, 3 questions added to an engagement or a statistically validated DEI survey. Good for you guys. Thank you. So do you see the results there? I hope you do. So let's continue. Survey question best practices. And this is one thing that we worked on when we were creating the assessment. What you want to have is questions or statements that evoke the truth, the deeper meaning that you're trying to discover. And we want to be able to accomplish, oh, here, share results. Boop. Stop sharing. So all participants answer all questions because we don't want to have some, and we do that with our assessment. Everybody has to answer everything. The statements should measure one thing only. They shouldn't have, you know, the A and the B when they're not necessarily connected. Statements are possible to answer with knowledge, and then statements are written at an 8th grade reading level to accommodate all respondents. It's not only the 8th grade reading level, it's also English as a second language. So I'm going to give you some statements here and put down just a yes or no. Does the management shows that diversity is important through their actions? Is that statement, is that part of best practices? Yes or no? And just put it in the chat. Yes, yes, yes. Very good. Good answer. Here's another one. And these are from actual assessments that I grabbed from various places, which shall remain nameless. I have friends from a variety of ethnicities and abilities. Yeah, no, that it measures 2 things. Correct, Valerie. Correct, Lori. Here's another one. The profile of our employees appropriately reflects the diversity of our beneficiaries and stakeholders. And this one, what do you think? Does that answer? I see a couple of no's. Exactly, Lori. They as an employee wouldn't know that. And here's the last one. How would you rate the accessibility and availability of professional development opportunities for all employees, irrespective of their background or identity? No. No. They wouldn't know that. So these are not. That's the only one that is remaining of that group that follows best practices. Here's another. This is a measurement myth, and I heard this from some of my colleagues and clients that, you know, they get all happy. Yay, I got 40% response. And they think that that's maybe all they need, but that's not necessarily true. At Spectra, what our standard is to have a 95% confidence level and a 2% margin of error. Confidence level is the probability that your sample accurately reflects the attitudes of your population. We use 95%. Margin of error is the range, measured as a percentage, that your population's response may deviate from your samples. And so this is our standard at Spectra, 95% confidence level and 2% margin of error. When we have large assessments, this is how we charge. We don't charge for, say, 2,000 people. We put this formula of 2,000 people into a little formula that's on SurveyMonkey. And Tammy, do you want to share the SurveyMonkey link? And people can use that to determine how many people is a good amount of what is a good response. So here's some examples. So if you've got 50 people in your organization, you need to get 49 in order to have a 95% confidence level and a 2% margin of error. So that's way more than 40%, it's 98%. If you have 500 people, you need to get 414, which is 82% to get that same 95% confidence, 2% margin of error. If you have 5,000, you need to get 1,623, which is 32%. So it's a myth that you need to get a certain percentage. The percentage that you need to get depends on the size of your overall sample. So, measurement myth, that the average score tells the whole story. No. The spread of the scores matters, and I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. And also the data tells you the what, it doesn't tell you the why. We had one survey where the Asian American population went from a high score in their management, their perceptions of management. They went from a 4.1 to a 2.9. Well, the 2.9 was a year during COVID. And, you know, the data said that the Asian American population radically changed their perception of what management was doing, but it doesn't tell you the why. That would need a little bit more digging. And low trust organizations give you low average scores. We've seen that in the data that we get back. And the way that we know that an organization, our first clue that an organization is going to have low trust is that the client will say, well, let's not ask for anyone's names on this, because if we ask for their names, they don't think it's going to be private when they get their report back. Well, that they can do that, but then their report is going to come back without a name on it. It's just going to be, you know, a blank report. So we can do that. Or another way that we see a low trust organization is they ask us not to collect certain types of data. Like they will say, don't ask what the employee's sexual orientation is. And that right there says that they're, you know, that they are nervous about how the data is going to come in, what feedback or blowback they might get. So that is something to keep an eye on. And here's an example of this. Here's an example. This particular organization actually was a low trust organization. When they asked for their demographics, they took out one of the questions, which was for a third gender or non, for people that are trans, for example. And you'll see there that there's the difference between the female and the male. And the reason for that, even though they're only 0.3 apart, the range here shows that more people, the males, here you can see that there's a lot more males on the top end of the score than there are females. And the difference between these two numbers, the 3.5 and the 3.8, the difference between the number of people, the 235 and the 81, and the difference between the range of where those scores are, means that those are statistically significant, the difference between them. And that shows up in our reports as it's color coded. Here is another example of the same question, similar size organization, but here you see the men and the women, even though they're 0.2 apart, and there's way more men than women. In this one, there were more women than men, but you know, according to the number of people, the average and the spread, they're not statistically significant. You'll also see that this is how the other prefer not to answer. This is how they show up. And the non-binary third gender, if there's fewer than 5, we don't show it. So what we don't know, so there's 276 responses, but there were more employees than 276. And that is the missing data, which Amanuel will talk about now. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Amanuel can share his.
Thank you very much, Chris. I apologize to everybody. I had to turn off my camera because I got a little indicator that said that my internet is unstable. So I'm going to do this presentation without my camera on. Can everybody see my screen?
I see your screen and I hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So my presentation is going to be on missing data and why it can be problematic for you. So I'm going to start out by talking about, giving you a description of what missing data looks like, and then under what circumstances it can be problematic, solutions for dealing with missing data. So I'll start by just giving us this hypothetical context, which seems very plausible for, I think you said like 56% of the people on this, in this webinar responded that they are DEI consultants. So in this context, imagine you're a DEI consultant or HR professional, and that you're conducting for an organization, a DEI survey that has 6 demographic questions, 31 core questions. So those 31 core questions are really like the questions that tap into diversity or the perceptions of diversity, equity. And what you're hoping to do is, once you get these survey results, you're hoping that they give you an insight into the challenges that the organization is facing and maybe their strengths related to DEI. And so you've implemented the survey, you've collected the data, you download the data, ready to do some analysis and presentations, and you see that your data set contains missing data. And so what do I mean by missing data? It's easiest to depict it here in the form of a spreadsheet, because this is what it would look like when you receive it. So let's imagine that you have a question that was related to the race of the respondent, and then a question about the number of years that they've been at the organization, and then individual questions. Let's imagine that these are on a strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree scale. And of course, those are converted into numbers, perform calculations. And like a lot of these surveys, let's imagine you've got a scale, like an equity scale, that is the result of adding up these numbers. So that's the typical spreadsheet that you might see when you download a data set from a survey. And just to illustrate this, we'll do a little thought experiment, and it's helpful to think about what individuals would have said if they responded. And so we'll do that here. And I've illustrated that here by these different cells having the different font color here. So this first example is a respondent who responded to all of the questions, and so they have complete data. And so does the second one. But in this case, this person did not respond to the question about race, but had they would have selected Asian. So that's what I mean here with this grayed out. And it says Asian here. And they responded to the years at the organization question, the first 2 questions about equity, but they didn't to question 3. And had they, though, they would have had a score of 4. Now, of course, in real life, you don't know what folks would have said, but this is helpful to illustrate what I'll be talking about later on. So this is one type of missing data where a respondent simply doesn't answer one or more questions, but they answer other questions. So this third respondent didn't answer the race question or question 3. Answered the race question and the number of years, but they didn't answer question 1 or question 3. And it's common for computer programs, if you are missing one of those items, then you can't calculate a total score. like you would for equity. So negative ramifications of having missing data is computer programs can't handle missing data. And so if you can't add up the items, the scores that they got for multiple items, then that's score for that. Another type of missing data is for the individual who just didn't respond at all to your survey. And I've got that depicted here. Of course, in your data set, they just wouldn't have a row. But that's another type of missing data, is this non-response, where, of course, you send out a survey to everybody, but then some of them literally go to it, don't fill out anything. So then why does this matter? Like I said before, the reason comes down to the fact that computer programs can't handle this. So if you wanted to calculate like an average score for equity for everybody, of course, you calculate the average for those scores that you have. So only person 1, person 2, and person 5's data would go into that average and go into it. So whether or not this is a problem really depends on why the data are missing. And there's a couple of ways in which the data can be missing. One way is that so imagine that the only reason you have is that these folks just simply accidentally skip the questions. It's not because they don't trust the organization. It's not because they have low perceptions of the equity of the organization. They just accidentally skip the questions, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. And if that happens, you'll end up getting so Chris just informed me that my audio is cutting out, so I'm going to try to repeat this here. So if the data are missing completely at random, it's actually okay, because the results that you get from an analysis that only includes the data that you have is going to be very similar to what you would have gotten if everybody completed all of the questions. In contrast, if there's a reason for the missing data, if certain folks are less likely to respond to the questions, if the people who have lower trust in the organization are less likely to respond to the questions, now you've got a problem. And I'll give an illustration of what that can look like here. So for this example, I did what's called a simulation. I created data for a hypothetical survey, and I created a race variable, and then I gave responses, hypothetical responses for folks. And I assumed that white respondents would have higher perception of equity on average compared to non-white respondents. And so with this simulated data, this is what the results look like if everybody answers all the questions. So again, on average, white respondents had a score of 8. Hispanic was a little bit lower, was 13.7, and Asian is 16.4. And then what I did was I took this complete data and I said, okay, well, let me make some of the data be missing completely at random, again, for no reason whatsoever. And then what you get in terms of the results are like this. The averages are actually very similar. In fact, they're identical here, nearly identical here, and then identical here. And you can see that the minimums and the maximums are the same. We're very close. Then the next thing I did was I said, okay, well, now let's have the complete data, but now I'm going to make the data be missing, not at random. What I'm going to do that non-white respondents, sorry, these are the columns here. I'm going to assume that non-white respondents are more likely to have missing data related to the equity question. And what you see here then is that it actually artificially inflates the scores, the average scores for the non-white respondents and white respondents also had missing data. It was just that the non-white respondents to have missing data. So clearly, this is a problem if you're wanting of the organization.
Can you repeat that, Amanuel? This is a problem if what?
If you want to get an accurate picture of the organization, this is going to be a problem. And so, of course, here, when I simulated the data, I'm sort of, I'm playing God. I made the data, I made them missing in these different ways, so I can see what the impact would be. But in real life, you're often not going to have this data for everybody that you sent the survey to. Instead, you're going to have missing data, usually, and it's very unlikely that the data are going to be missing completely at random. We as humans very rarely have missing data just by chance. There's lots of reasons that we don't complete surveys, that we don't complete all of the questions when we do respond to a survey. It's more likely that your results are going to have missing data because of some factors. What can you do about missing data? Course of action is actually prevention. Having less missing data is better, and you can get to that with some of the best practices that Chris alluded to. Asking fewer questions, asking less sensitive questions. So asking about exact salary, maybe having ranges that they can pick from. You can reduce the amount of information you're trying to collect through a survey often by getting that data from the organization in advance. So when they give you an email list, you could have information about all the potential respondents so that you don't have to ask those questions of the respondent. Another thing that you can do is try to examine the missing data patterns and see, well, are non-white respondents more likely to have some of these questions? Because that can give you an idea of what the impact will be. You can also conduct to find out why folks didn't complete the survey or skipped certain questions. Now, there are more advanced techniques to after the fact, like one called imputation, where you're trying to use all the information to try to figure out what those responses could have been, and then doing sophisticated analyses to remedy. That's not really common outside of academia. So for this reason, I really like the idea of minimizing missing data. So to summarize, data can be missing for one or more questions, or people could just not respond whatsoever to the survey. And whether the missing data have a negative impact really depends on the why for why the data are missing. And then the best treatment for missing data is to prevent it in the first place through good survey design principles and practices like Chris alluded to earlier. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to did you want to, I'm going to share screen 2. I hope you can see this. Standardized tests are biased. There, share that one. Do you want to address this at all, Emmanuel?
Yes, I can see that. Thank you. Pick a measurement myth that I've heard often, and this is one of those. I do a lot of work in education, and sometimes when I have conversations with folks and tell them what I do, one of the things that I hear is, "Oh yeah, standardized tests are biased, right?" And the reason why I don't, well, the reason why this is a myth is sort of the blanket statement there. It's definitely possible that a standardized test can exhibit bias, but often they are the types of tests that are least likely to be biased because the companies that produce them have systematic processes in place and often follow professional guidelines for assessing, have statistical techniques to try to detect it. And then when they do detect it, the questions that do show bias. And I like to contrast this to the majority of us and taken by folks, most of which are not standardized and are much more susceptible to bias. You can think of these as like, when you went to college and you had your professor give you a test and you looked at some of those questions and you were confused by the question, it didn't quite make sense. They don't receive special training on how to create assessment. They were a lot more biased than the kinds of tests you took, the state standardized assessment or something like that, or a professional credential assessment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions there about our measurement myths? You can put them in the Q&A or the chat. I'm actually monitoring the chat. So what I do want to mention to you, and this is going to be an upgrade to Spectra's work, is the way that we're doing it good in terms of missing data is that everybody has to answer every question. When it comes to the demographics, we allow people to select other or prefer not to answer, but because we're a third party and because of the communication that we have in place, very few people select that option. But the area where Emmanuel was talking about, where we have missing data, is the people that don't complete the assessment at all. So we're working on a system where what HR has collected, we will compare to what we have collected and identify the demographic or job role areas where people did not respond. So who didn't take the survey at all? Was it a particular race? Was it executives? Was it women? Who was it that didn't respond? So we're working on that as a new feature that we will launch. So a more specific data question: are you seeing different results or trends? Oops, I got it. We do, and we do. And what I can direct you to is we did actually in our annual report, we looked at the responses in our 5 demographic categories according to industries. So we've got nonprofits and banking and construction and healthcare and different sorts of industries, and they do have different DEI results. So yeah, it's the annual Spectra Assessment Report, ASAR. It's on our website under resources. It's right there. So I'm going to share my screen one more time and invite you to come to some of our other sessions. Can you see the, somebody tell me if you can see what's next. Yeah. Okay, thank you. February, this one would be if you want to invite some of your executives that may be on the fence about whether or not an assessment might be right for them, given the amount of DEI pushback that we're currently getting. That would be the February session. Nancy Schick, one of my colleagues, is going to be our legal leader on that. But we've got really good ones coming up. Leaders, genders, sexual orientations, people of color, brain health, I'm excited about. Younger and older employees, so just got a new speaker for that. And then our last one is about veterans with James Johnson, a retired brigadier general. And I'm really excited about those. So I think we are in time for our giveaway, and must be present to win. So, for Dr. Amanuel, do you see AI having any impact on this topic, ability to better analyze surveys? And I have an answer to that one too. Amanuel, do you want to take it first?
Sure. I think, AI is not a field that I spend a lot of time in. I am starting to use AI in my computer program.
Oops,
Helpful.
you broke up. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I am starting to use AI in my statistical programming, and it's helping make the process a lot more efficient. I think that one area, so I focused a lot on missing data in my graduate training, and I know that there are newer techniques to try to use machine learning to resolve missing data, and those area that I want to dive into. So it's a very exciting time.
And from Spectra's perspective, we just found a way to sort and analyze our open-ended responses. We have 2 open-ended questions in our assessment, and we found a way to use AI to put them into themes, and also to cross-reference the themes to our demographics that we collect. So we can see different statements, positive, negative, brainstorming ideas, kudos, whatever kind of a statement. And we can cross-reference that with our demographics, race, men and women, sexual orientation, veterans. So if there's a particular type of comment that's coming in and a particular type of demographic is responding strongly to that, we'll be able to see that and put that in a report. So yeah, that's going to be, we're kind of excited about it. I won't be doing it because I'm not good enough. So there's Lee has put his LinkedIn. Anybody else, if you want to put your LinkedIn information into the chat so other people can grab it, that would be good. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll do our giveaway. Questions? See some. Thank you, Christina. All right, Tammy, who gets our giveaway? Oh, and you probably want to know what the giveaway is. It's the book. Yay! Which you can either read for yourself. I tried to make it an easy read, but you could also give it to your favorite CEO that is sitting on the fence in terms of doing an assessment or not. So Tammy, who's our first?
All right, so Chris will send you an email to confirm, to get your address and send the book out to you. But if you could confirm that you are still on the call when I give the names, that would be great because it is be present to win. And the first one is Christina Smith.
Oh,
Christina, are you out there?
she is still on.
All right, awesome. And our second one is Lee Shull. Lee, are you still on?
I just saw him a minute ago. Lee, are you there? Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, awesome.
All right, we've got
Congratulations.
2 winners. Woohoo! And thank you very much. I hope that I will see you in future webinars. We intend to make them as useful as possible. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. I'm feeling the love. Thank you. Bye-bye.